Hello YouTube and welcome to another web development tutorial. So in this video I will continue my introduction to how to use the Emmet extension for your favorite editor. So here I'm using actually brackets, and I will show you how you can use it in order to get fast coding with CSS. So as you have seen on my last video, I showed you how to use it with HTML, but now let's focus on actually the CSS. So as you can see here, I have just a project with two files. So here I have my file style.css. So normally for CSS you have to type .class, okay, then you provide the attributes. So here Emmet is installed, so I will show you just some abbreviations that you can use when working with CSS. So I will start by the most useful or most used one. So for example, for the width, normally you type width, okay, and you specify how many pixels that you want for your width. So for example 100 pixel, okay. But now I will be using Emmet. So in order to get this attribute, all I have to do is just to type W then 100, and I will hit tab on my keyboard, and voila, I get the result. So without typing the whole actually attribute and values. So I can also use it with percentage. So I will just type W100, but by default it will get actually the numbers in pixels. But if I want them in percentage, I have to add P at the end, then tab. Here we go, we get the same value but this time in percentage, okay. I can do the same for the height. So I will just type H, for example 25, so I will get by default pixels, okay. If I want it on percentage, so I will just type H then 50p, for example. Here we go, we get our results. If you want the width with auto value, it's also pretty easy, W and A and tab. So I get the width auto. I can have the same for the height, so I'll just type H and A for auto, then tab, okay. So it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward when using Emmet, okay. So let's work with something also very useful. For example, for positioning, normally you work a lot with top attribute, so it's the same with width. So I will just type T for top, then for example 64, and I will hit tab. So I will get the same in pixels. I can get it in percentage, T64 and P, and voila, I get the same result in percentage. Something also you can use is with the positioning absolute and relative. So in this case I will tap P for position, then colon, then the attribute or the value, for example A for absolute. I can have for relative, I will tap P then colon, then R for relative, and for fixed position P column F, okay. So it's just easy as that, okay. So you remember that you have just to add the column in this case, so we'll not got actually something else. So sometimes you have to add the column, sometimes not, so it depends. So for the colors, for example, I can just type C for color and hash, and I will provide the hexadecimal value. For example, for the color white, I can just type FFF 3 times and the tab, so I will get my color. I can have the same color if I add the column. For example, I will type C column, then the hash for my color. let's say for example I want just black. I will just type 0 and tab, so I will get the same result. Okay, let's move on. For example, let's say what you can get with the float attribute. So float is, the abbreviation is FL. So if I type just FL and the tab, I will get by default the float left. But I can also get the float for the right this time. So I will type FL, then the R, and I will hit tab. So I will get this time float right. So by default, if I just type FL, it will get me float right or float left actually. And if I want the right, I will have just to add the letter R. Okay, let's move on to the display. For example, for the display, I will just type D for display. So most of the cases we use block or inline. So for block, I will just add the letter B. So if I hit tab, I will get display block. For display inline actually, I will just type D and I. Here we go, I get the result I want. Okay, so let's move on to, for example, margin. So for the margin, it's M. So let's say I want the margin of 50 pixels. So it's like the top. All I have to do is to type the command M50, then the tab on my keyboard. So I will get the same result as top. If you want, for example, margin right, I will add just letter R. So MR. Let's say I want a margin right of let's say 60 pixels. So I'll get the result. If you want, for example, the margin left, but this time 60%, so I'll have to add the letter P. So margin left 60%. Here we go, we have the same result. Also, as you know, if you're working with CSS, you work a lot with padding. So the padding is letter P, and you have to add actually the number of pixels, 25 for example. So you have percentage or pixels, 25 pixel for padding. You can also use here PL for padding left, and you can specify how many pixels that you want. Okay, so just here make sure to not interfere with the position. With the position we have to add the column, but with the padding you don't have to add it. You just type P and the letter that you want, L for left or R for right. So that's why in some cases you have to add the column, and in some cases not, if it has no conflict with other attributes. Okay, so let's move on to another things. So let's say for example you want to work with text alignment. So if I want text align attribute, I have to type TA. So I have text align by default for left. Okay, so let's say that you want the text align right. So I will just type TA R and I will get the result I want. Okay, so also it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward, and it's very interesting for fast actually CSS coding. And finally, let's work with the fonts. So for the font family, I will just type FF for font family. Let's say I want it, for example, Arial. I have to add the A, and if I type the tab, I will get font family Arial by default. Okay, let's say that I want the font family this time not Arial, but let's say Times New Roman. So I'll tap FF for font family, and I will add, for example, T. Okay, so you see here I got Times New Roman by default. Okay, you can also work with the font weight. So for the font weight, it's FW. Let's say that you want font weight of bold, for example. I will add B here. So I have here the font weight of bold. And finally with the font style. So for the font styles, it's FS. So if you want something italic, you have just to add the I for italic. So I have the attribute font style italic. Let's say that you want just font style normal. So it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. FSN for normal. Then I will hit the tab on my keyboard, and I will get the font style of normal. So as you have seen, there are a lot of abbreviations that you can use when you are working with CSS, and Emmet is very interesting and very important if you want to write CSS coding very fast. Okay, so I hope it has been informative for you, and I will thank you for viewing. And don't forget, there are always some very interesting cheat sheets on the internet that you can find all the abbreviation that you want. Okay,